what's the greatest challenge you thought anyway coming in? What was the greatest challenge you were going to face? Because again, anytime someone starts a new job, they'd like to be able to take a few days and really soak up the culture, interact with people, and then you lay out your plan of how you want to proceed going forward. Well, that went out the window, but what do you think is the challenge, and what should be uh, your plan for the next 3 to 6 months once we get over this initial, very important but unusual week or 2 weeks of interaction?
Well, the biggest challenge for me is, most instances where I've come in as police chief, I've been able to, as you described, meet the players within the organization, really get to know, the intellectual capital that I have inside the police department, and start moving pieces around and, looking at policies and procedures and making changes in ways that are collaborative, and I have the cooperation of members of the organization to do it. In this instance, I was sort of thrust into meeting the community first and not being able to really get a good gauge on the young men and women here that work so hard to keep this city safe. So my message has been to both the community and the officers, because I know the officers are listening and they're watching and they're seeing the example that their police chief sets. And if there's anything that I've, really been adamant about, is that we will move forward inclusively, and we will do so treating people with decency and respect. And decency and respect and sanctity of human life are things that you'll see later on be recurring themes in our mission, our vision for this organization. But also, the officers needed to really know that their chief was someone that would be out front, that would, take on some of the issues and problems that they're hearing from members of the community head on. And like you said, the planning process sort of goes out the window, but nonetheless, we have to put together a realistic, a smart plan that moving forward has all of the bells and whistles from members of the community, members of the business area, maybe I should say business community in this area, and members of city management. So that will take shape over the next few months, and then I'll present that information to City Council. But I was really happy to have the diversity lens of members of the community that were out there and frustrated with what they're seeing across the country from other police departments. Yes, Waterloo Police Department hasn't had that front page splash over the last few months or the last year, but we have to understand that these things have happened here as well as other places in the country. And perhaps the biggest and most challenging issue for a police chief now in the United States is, you can have something happen in rural South Dakota that once televised will have an effect upon police officers, their families, and communities more across this nation. So contrary to times in the 1950s or 1960s, when something would happen, you would get it in the form of a newspaper clipping or a front page picture on a newspaper. Now we're seeing things almost instantaneously. And moreover, we're called to just, capitalize upon the goodwill that we have in the community to get through these things. When you're in a department that is recovering from some bad community relations, it's a little harder to dwell upon goodwill because you don't have much banked. I think that here we have a willingness to bank that goodwill so that in the event that something does happen, we're well positioned to communicate with members of the community and get their confidence back in this department. There's just a change in the way we do business. And that change in the way we do business is something that every officer has seen from the front, but I would love to be able to, communicate with them in a one-on-one like I would in other departments, but that just hasn't been the case now. And I look forward to actually having those conversations and answering those questions, just as I did with members of the community, with members of my department.
This is going to sound like pandering on my part, but it would have been very easy Monday night because your family had just come to town. You had just gotten sworn in to say, well, I want to settle in and watch how this plays out. But instead, it was necessary, and you did then get right in the middle of it. It was necessary for your staff, your employees, your officers to see that their chief led from the front and not the behind of the force, and for the community to see that you were going to not just take some time to figure out the job, you were going to jump right in. And so again, it sounds
Sure.
like pandering on my part, but there are some great opportunities that you've already suggested that gave you a great opportunity to make some connections on the first day on the job that otherwise might not have been the case. And we've had folks from Minnesota on this program, and they have talked about a history of problems with the Minneapolis Police Department. And so, to your point, if you don't have a bank of goodwill, then you have nothing to draw upon but bad examples in the worst case scenario. And so I fully understand what you're saying. We've got about 2 or 3 minutes left. Tell the audience, if you would, finally, and I hope you'll come back again so we can continue these dialogues as things continue. What is it that members of the general public typically get wrong about law enforcement? What do they not understand that then creates a potential problem that doesn't need to be there?
Oh, I'll put it really simply. If I'm a plastic surgeon in Los Angeles and I do a bad job, you don't see it in New York City. You don't see it in Philadelphia. You don't see it everywhere in the continental United States or the outlying states. The police officer's job, albeit one of great nobility, we're hiring folks that perhaps nowadays don't have the same level of social skills that many others have, and that's because we have to recruit and hire from areas outside of our city, and that's not for lack of trying within your city. It is just a fact that you get people from outside of your particular area, your city, that don't necessarily identify with folks there, and there's a learning process and a period where they develop those social skills. With police officers, you're expected to have those social skills day one. And it's an unrealistic expectation that, a police academy of, let's say, 9 months or so can change a young kid into this person that can mediate arguments or can go into someone's house and tell one person they're wrong and take someone else out in handcuffs and not, have some type of slippage. We have to remember that these officers are human beings. They're tasked with a tremendous level of responsibility. I get that. And I totally understand that we can have generational impacts on people's lives. But I think that's the focus we need to have now in training the modern police officer. Working on the social skills more, putting them in scenarios while they're in training, so that when they're faced with scenarios out on the streets, they don't, react viscerally. They react calmly, when they can, and they are able to apply sort of a slow it down process, or as we call de-escalation process, that will allow them to think through something without reacting, and that turning into a situation that every police officer across the country will pay for. That is the renewed emphasis now in policing, de-escalation, procedural justice, and reducing those implicit biases that you may have coming into this job, but you can't have when you go out and you possess police powers out on the street.
Chief, I've enjoyed this conversation greatly. I trust the audience has as well. And as I said, I look forward to continuing this as you get a better handle of things and we get past this initial period of time. Thank you so much for taking the time, and best of luck in this new position.
Thank you again for the opportunity to introduce myself to the community.